quick shout out to Karen J. Renner's publication of Evil Children in Film and Literature. I am basically ripping this full sale from that publication. Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to yet another one of my history lessons on a broad topic that Zach chose probably after watching one specific movie. This time it's not Air Bud, but I'll get to that later. The topic for today is history of evil children in movies. The topic of the history of evil children in movies is a fairly limited and also subjective one. It calls into question what exactly is evil and what exactly is a child. Childhood itself wasn't always even a concept. If you look at paintings before the 1800s, children were just drawn and thought of as little adults up until the passage of Fair Labor Standards Act, or the FLSA, in 1938. Kids were still working in factories, and it wasn't until even the 40s when the term teenagers started to be used, allowing more of a divide between childhood and adulthood. Now, what is evil? There were some depictions of child gangsters before the Hays Code, which, if you don't know, was the code that started in the 30s. They basically made everyone Puritans in the movies. Really, the first instance is The Bad Seed in 1959. Before we get into all of that, to really dig into the zeitgeist of evil children, we need to start with literature. Sort of the pre-evil child was known as the changeling. Basically, any fairies or imps that can be played by children in plays, but were actually other creatures. These were probably just ways to explain away mentally ill children, like the one Martin Luther saw in 1532 and said, quote, "If I were the prince or the ruler here, I would throw this child into the water, into the Mulda that flows from Oh, well, I can't fucking hear it.
Dessau.
Oh, there we go. You had me at hello. I would dare commit homicidium on him. Such a changeling child is only a piece of flesh, a mass of carnage, because it has no soul." That was Martin Luther. Okay, speaking of Christian celebrities, Cain from the classic Cain and Abel series is a classic evil child example, which is why the Catholics believe in original sin. Yet Protestants, which is established by the child-killing Martin Luther, and Jews and Muslims all think otherwise. So the thought was that children are innocent unless you can prove they're not a child. Then you can kill them. Outside of changelings, evil children could also be in the feral child category. So, for most of history, being a feral child was actually a good thing. The story of Romulus and Remus of Rome have the founders of the Roman empires being two children raised by wolves. I'm just going to read directly from The Evil Child in Literature. In the Romantic period, human nature was considered by many to be naturally moral, and civilization a contaminating influence that caused its inhabitants to deviate from original virtue. Under such belief, the uncivilized child was exalted for its purity and was thought to exhibit more integrity than the cultured, akin to the so-called noble savage. In his 1841 essay Self-Reliance, for example, Ralph Waldo Emerson proclaimed, "What pretty oracles nature yields us in the face and behavior of children, babes, even brutes. Their mind, being whole their eye, is as yet unconquered, and when we look in their faces, we are disconcerted." The disconcertion around brutish children soon dropped its pure interior to being just pure evil. One of the early instances of a change was in Henry James's 1898 novella, The Turning of the Screw, in which a governess is convinced the two kids she is taking care of are possessed by a ghost. But the narrative really does not take off until the 1940s, with Ray Bradbury's The Small Assassin. 4 years later, the first story in his short story collection, The Illustrated Man, the short story being called The Veld also featured killer children, both of which show children as killers with no real reason. Why is it still here? Oh, hello. Didn't know you guys were still here. Finally, in 1956, we have The Bad Seed. And in 1961, we have Twilight Zone's The Good Life. Kids killed for no reason other than boredom, and it feels just in their nature to do so, completely flipping the narrative of innocent kids from centuries before. But in the 60s, the genre developed from a what-if to more of a commentary on kids being evil as a product of their own environment. The feral child turned into hordes of children turned evil because the world was evil. There's Lord of the Flies, Clockwork Orange, and the Spanish movie Who Can Kill a Child. Similarly, the genre of possessed or demonic children in the 70s started from a parenting crisis. Kids, no matter how innocent, are still vulnerable to evil. There was Halloween, The Exorcist, The Omen, and Alice, Sweet Alice. You could be the perfect example of what a parent should be, and still your child could be a murdering demon. In 1965, for the very first time, we had a photo of an unborn fetus in the famous In Vitro, the Life photograph. 4 years later, Rosemary gave birth to the son of Satan and Rosemary's Baby. We have a similar topic of giving birth to an evil baby, but this time coming from a man in Ridley Scott's Alien. Now, the focus was away from the child learning to be evil. Instead, the fetus is evil. And the world of giving birth was changing rapidly in the 70s. See, Roe v. Wade made abortion legal in 1973, and the first IVF baby was in 1978. Now, this is actually from How to See in Horror, the hostile fetus in Rosemary's Baby and Alien. The fraud effects of visual access on the social power of fetuses in the 1960s and 70s, and the counter-rhetoric and the technological triumphs of medical imaging with warnings about the irrevocable consequence of revealing what lies hidden. This all expresses the fear that technology is assisting the fetus in rapidly gaining far too much autonomy, and that men may also eventually serve as mothers, fodder for an invasive fetus parasite. Newborns were the focus of many horror movies in the 70s, including Eraserhead and It's Alive. It was all over the place. The David Cronenberg's combines both the feral horror child and possessed child narratives into a perfect end to the 70s evil children movie genre with The Brood. Children represent an act on the trauma of their mother. They are both born as killers, but also the result of previous horrors of the world. From the publication, My Baby Ate the Dingo, the visual construction of the monster infant in horror films, it says that evil children narratives are perhaps influenced by terror management theory, which is a basic psychological conflict stemming from two competing facts of human existence: the possession of a self-preservation instinct and the realization that death is inevitable, and to some extent unpredictable. Having a child breaks free of this fear by becoming immortal, but at what cost?
Use enough dynamite there, bud?
I do want to point out briefly Frankenstein, which captures all of these same fears, but roughly 150 years earlier. We see you, Mary Shelley, a true exception to my very linear historical analysis. Now, the article, The Evil Child in Literature, Film, and Pop Culture, kind of stops there. We're going on into the 80s, folks. The 80s carried on these tropes, but with less nuance, as slasher movies became more the rage. One exception being Children of the Corn, which was still a book from the 70s. So you have Beware Children at Play, takes the same religious horror child theme and makes it more campy. Bloody Birthday 2 repeats the Born Bad theme, but turns it into a schlocky cult classic. The most classic slasher movie of the 80s, Friday the 13th, literally features a murderous mom and her child. The 90s returns to the original nice, innocent child who are actually evil trope, with Macaulay Culkin and The Good Son, and don't forget, much like the 50s, the 90s was a time of overall U.S. political stability, which is why everything seemed quiet. Too quiet. In the late 90s, there was Columbine, and these old tropes began to kind of fade away as reality set in. Soon after, there was Battle Royale, the Japanese movie from 2001. What if school students were forced to kill each other by the government? Now children weren't just connected to families, but society as a whole. After the effects of Columbine settled in, more movies came out about school shootings, like Gus Van Sant's Elephant and Leon Ramsey's We Need to Talk About Kevin. In some ways, the contextualizing and societal and psychological reasons behind evil children became overbearing, as with the remake of Halloween, where Michael Myers is now from an abusive family. Which brings us to now. A lot of the genres have been swept up in a remaking of old IP like Halloween 29, and what if Superman was a bad kid, like in Brightburn? I feel like original evil children movies now are back to revolving around witchcraft and demons. We have The Witch, Hereditary, The Innocents, and more recently, Weapons. Now, what does all this mean? I don't really know. All I know is Zach probably watched Weapons, and that's why we're doing this research. Also, my tripod is now officially broken, which you witnessed earlier. So over to you, Zach.